All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to unpack a case that is, frankly, one of the most chilling exploration mysteries of modern history. We're looking at a 2025 Amazon expedition that kicked off as a completely standard mapping mission, but ended in absolute terror. We usually think of the Amazon rainforest as the lungs of the earth, right? This vibrant, life-giving place. But as we're about to see by analyzing the records of this totally doomed expedition, there are certain patches on the map that are left blank for a very good reason. So let's just dive right into this. Our focus today centers on this highly specific, incredibly isolated region. Honestly, the locals living near its borders won't even speak its name after the sun goes down. They call it the Whispering Heart. Way before the team even set foot in the jungle, they were confronted with this terrifying local legend about the untouched territory. The belief is super specific. Once you hear the forest actually calling your name, it never ever lets you leave. It's this massive psychological hook right out of the gate. And that local belief translates into one incredibly strict rule. Their local guide, a guy named Miguel, gave the crew a dead serious warning before they even crossed the tree line. He looked at them and said, "Whatever you hear at night, don't answer." Now, unfortunately, the rest of the crew kind of just laughed it off. The filmmaker on the team even noted they assumed it was just some spooky ghost story meant to thrill the tourists. But Miguel, he wasn't smiling. He knew it wasn't just a story.
So, let's look at who we're actually dealing with here. This 2025 crew was made up of 5 people, and each of them brought some highly technical expertise to document this completely unmapped region. We've got Ethan, our wildlife photographer, Sarah, a biologist, Miguel, obviously our local guide, Daniel, the filmmaker, and Olivia, a journalist. These were seasoned professionals, highly rational, logical people, which honestly makes what happens next so much more fascinating to unpack.
For the first couple of days, everything was totally idyllic. The logs describe these beautiful bright parrots, monkeys in the canopy, and these strange, glowing insects at night. It sounds amazing. But on the third night, the whole vibe shifted. Ethan woke up to a voice that sounded exactly like his mother. And guys, his mother had died years earlier. This voice drifted through the trees, calling him by name, and lured him right out of his tent while everyone else slept. By the time morning rolled around, the jungle had completely swallowed him.
The search for Ethan the next morning is really where the true horror of this situation starts dawning on the crew. They found muddy footprints leading straight into the dense brush, but absolutely no footprints coming back. It was a one-way trail. They spent hours out there, just screaming his name into the trees, and nothing answered back, except for this distant, quiet whisper of Ethan's name coming from way too close in the jungle.
That very same night, the psychological warfare really ramped up. Sarah suddenly heard the unmistakable sound of her younger sister laughing out in the dark. Naturally, she starts to follow it. But Miguel literally grabs her arm and physically stops her, dropping this horrifying realization about how this specific forest hunts. He told her the forest copies memories. Think about that. It doesn't just lure you with random noises. It weaponizes your own mind, your nostalgia, and your deepest connections right against you.
Now, the dread hits a boiling point the next day when they stumble across Ethan's camera just hanging from a branch. Daniel plugs the memory card into his laptop, and the footage is, well, it's highly disturbing. The camera is shaking wildly, Ethan is running, just gasping for air. At one point, he mutters, "There are people watching me." The camera pans, and at first it's just trees, but then, if you look closely, dozens of pale faces slowly emerge between the leaves, and not a single one of them blinks. The recording just abruptly cuts out with a horrifying scream.
Moving into the next phase, the jungle closes in. Let's talk about the navigational failures and those floating lights.
So, obviously panicked by this footage, the group decides to bail immediately. But they quickly realize they can't. The forest is actively trapping them. All their modern tech completely flatlines against the jungle. The GPS starts spitting out completely impossible coordinates. Compasses are just spinning in circles. But the craziest part? The physical paths they had literally just walked the day before had completely vanished, swallowed by thick vines. It was like the rainforest was actively rearranging its own geography overnight just to keep them locked in.
That evening, things get incredibly unnatural. A heavy storm rolls in, and through the pouring rain, they spot these small, glowing figures just floating silently above the ground. And they weren't fireflies, they were human-shaped. Olivia, being the journalist, instantly raises her camera to document this, but the exact microsecond she presses that shutter, boom! Every single light instantly vanishes, and the entire jungle goes completely, utterly silent.
I really want you to put this into perspective. The Amazon rainforest is literally one of the loudest, most biologically dense and active places on the planet, yet right after that camera click, not a single insect chirped. This heavy, suffocating, completely unnatural quiet just crashed down over the camp, and in the middle of that dead silence, Miguel leans in and whispers, "They know we're here."
A few hours go by, and that absolute silence is finally broken. It starts super small, just 3 slow knocks on a tree trunk right next to their camp. A simple, deliberate rhythm, just echoing in the dark.
And then, agonizingly, another tree, way off in the distance, answers back with that exact same rhythm.
Before they know it, dozens of trees are echoing that exact same knocking sound. The sound is rippling outward, completely surrounding the camp from every single direction. It wasn't random, it was a highly coordinated, deliberate acoustic assault from the forest itself. Desperate to see what on earth is surrounding them, Daniel whips his flashlight into the tree line, and there, standing between those massive trunks, are dozens of dark, human-shaped figures, just perfectly still, watching them. But here is the truly terrifying mechanic of these things. They vanished the exact millisecond a flashlight beam moved toward them. They only existed in the periphery, right there in the shadows. Which brings us to Panic in the Dark and their final, desperate escape. Surrounded by these impossible shadow figures and trapped in this shifting maze, the crew's rationality completely breaks. They just run blindly into the dark. Branches are clawing at them, and as they run, the forest busts out its ultimate weapon. Those deceptive whispers they heard earlier, they swell into a deafening roar, but it's perfectly tailored to each victim. Every single explorer started hearing different voices, their parents, their kids, their friends, people who couldn't possibly be within 1,000 miles of the Amazon. The jungle was literally mimicking their loved ones to disorient them, pull them apart, and pick them off one by one in the dark. Fast forward 3 agonizing weeks. That's how long it took for specialized rescue teams to finally locate anyone from the expedition. Out of a highly trained crew of 5, they found exactly 1 survivor, Miguel. They found him just sitting completely silent by a riverbed. The sheer terror of whatever he experienced out there over those 3 weeks had literally turned his hair completely white. When the rescue teams finally managed to ask Miguel what actually happened to the rest of the crew, he gave them this haunting 6-word explanation. He just said, "They answered when we answered back." And after he delivered that one sentence, he absolutely refused to ever speak a word about the expedition again. Now let's look at the final evidence, a terrifying discovery found years later.
So years down the line, long after the official case had gone totally cold, researchers actually managed to recover Daniel's battered camera from the jungle floor. Most of the memory card was completely fried by the elements, but a single, horrifying frame survived intact. And the image? It shows the 4 missing explorers standing shoulder to shoulder, smiling beneath these massive trees. But their eyes are completely, solidly black. And standing right behind them, just pouring out of the shadows, are hundreds of those silent, dark figures.
But here is the technical anomaly that takes this from unsettling to just deeply chilling. The timestamp on the camera's display, it was still counting upward. It just kept ticking forward, even though the physical battery had died literally years earlier. Now, some experts try to write this off as a corrupted file glitch, right? But the locals who actually know the legend, they believe something way worse. They believe that recording never actually ended.
This whole terrifying case study really leaves us questioning the true, uncharted depths of our own world. We like to think we've mapped everything, but this expedition proves there are still these ancient, predatory mechanisms out there that totally defy our modern tech and our understanding. And it forces us to ask you, directly, if the deepest, darkest parts of the forest start calling your name, using the voice of someone you love, would you actually have the strength to stay silent?
Because as this doomed crew found out the hard way, deep within the Amazon, when the wind dies down and the trees begin to whisper, the oldest rule is still the only one that actually matters. Never answer.